All right, guys, welcome back to another episode of the Natty News Daily podcast. It is Dan and myself. Leroy's a busy man, hard to tie down sometimes, but we got an interesting topic for you guys today. This is one that Dan's been wanting to talk about for quite some time. But if you've been watching the news of natural bodybuilding, aka our feed, you'll notice that there's quite a few high-level natural bodybuilders that have been announcing that they are switching over to the enhanced side of the sport. And I want to preface this whole episode by saying, like, this is nothing against like that personal decision. I think Dan and I both stand where like people can choose to do whatever they want to do, but for the sport itself as an industry, this isn't a great thing, right? So, Dan, since you came up with the topic, I'm going to turn it over to you. What are your thoughts? What are you seeing?
Yeah, I think just recently, the last few months, it seems like a lot of people have made the jump, which, like you said, no hate to them. And like we talked with Danny, who was on the podcast and made the decision. And I understand, to a large degree why they're making the decision. But we were talking off air. Two of the four WNBF world champions have made the jump, both Danny and Sam Hartman. Patrick Toish has also made the jump over with winning Ben Weider qualified for the Olympia. He decided to make the jump. And then Fabian, who's a former middleweight world champion in WNBF, um, is has also made the jump. So it's one of those things. It's like, okay, like what are the incentives here? Why are people jumping, and what can be done to encourage people to stick around in natural bodybuilding? I think that's a worthwhile discussion to have. These people aren't jumping over for no reason, right? They're seeing you know that from what I've gathered as kind of the next step in their journey. But what can be done within natural bodybuilding to get people to stick around and see, okay, I can take this further, I can climb higher, I can, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, you have to ask like what's drawing them there. And I think a lot of people that are maybe on like the fringes of the sport would immediately say like, well, it's for sponsorship money and it's for prize money and it's those things. But when you really break it down, the finances aren't there unless you're like the top guy, right? If you're like top five Mr. Olympia, yeah, you could probably make that claim. But I don't think many of the people that are transitioning over to that side of the sport are doing it for that reason. I think they're doing it because of their competitive nature and they want to continue to test themselves against the best, which I think is a criticism and a statement against the current state of natural bodybuilding and the level of competition, likely due to the way the industry is set up right now, right? So if you have multiple world champions of a very well established show saying like this isn't enough, either the standard of the production isn't good enough or the standard of the athlete that they're competing against isn't enough, right? Like something isn't there. For me personally, I think it's they want to continue to test themselves against the biggest fish in the pond. So the question is, how do we create that image or that perception within the natural ranks where like this is the best of the best and actually putting the best of the best on the same stage and not being as diluted as we are right now?
Yeah, yeah. And it's for me, it kind of the immediate thought, and this is just brainstorming, is how could we make it such, I say we, but us in natural bodybuilding organizations and such, make it such that people can further cement their legacy after big wins like that, right? Um, you win a world title. Does it do does there need to be some sort of additional sponsorship endorsement of the organization? Does there need to be additional money being put in? Does it need to be uh like some sort of like striving for like a Hall of Fame? Like if you can, like every year, certain people are elected in the Natural Bodybuilding Hall of Fame. Maybe that can be something, oh, I can become a legend in natural bodybuilding. But I almost feel like some people, at least the sentiment is like they win the title and they're like, okay, what's next? So, you
Yeah.
know, uh, well, I think that's kind of where my mind goes is like, what can be provided as the next? step, which I think there are things that can be done. Um, right? I lost you.
Yeah, and I think
Yep,
there are people
gotcha. Go ahead.
working on those things for, pie in the sky, like pure optimism. I would say that things we should see the sports as two parallels, but not as one being a stepping stone to the other, right? Like where we look at and we respect that side of the sport. And if people want to go that way, that's great. Even as a
Yeah,
natural, if you want to go that way, that's great, right? But it's not like one has to lead to the other, right? Where like you can go to the top in the natural realms and just hold that title and that be enough. But that I think that's a mindset switch. And some of that's branding and marketing and just like public perception, right? Because for the longest time, it has been the best bodybuilder in the world is Mr. Olympia. Doesn't matter, natural, enhanced, whatever. And I think a differentiation could be made there to change that perception, doing some of the things that you're saying.
yeah. And I mean, obviously you're involved with the DFBA, so you've thought about this, more in depth. Do you think sort of that unification and really funneling towards a premier unified event would, incentivize that further?
It certainly, in theory, should create a more competitive pool, right? Anytime you put restrictions in place on who can compete, i.e., being like an invitational. Now there's a higher caliber of athlete that should be on that stage. And then people are vying for those invitations. So people want to compete there. So it's drawing the best there because now there's incentive. And then, yeah, you have to back it up, right? Is it bigger prize money? Is it better promotion of the athlete? Is it guaranteed sponsorships with certain, title companies? Is it, a podcast circuit? Is it, a mini series, on a large YouTube or like even like a TV show, right? Like there's so many possibilities. You have to find the way to make it financially feasible for the organization or organizations to do that. And that's where we're stuck, right? There's going to be some creative thinking that has to happen. And there's got to be some just investment into the sport, but I don't see any reason why it can't happen. I use golf all the time as an example when I talk to people about this, right? Like, look at how much money is in golf. That is such a boring sport and it is an individual sport, right? Like when we think of the most lucrative sports, they're normally team sports, but like that's literally one guy going out, hitting a ball. And as a spectator, if you were there watching, you get to see a couple seconds of that guy and then that's it and he's gone, right? But yet there are millions and millions of dollars invested in that sport every single year. It didn't start out that way though, right? So just because natural bodybuilding now doesn't have the finances doesn't mean that down the road it can't. And we just have to evolve. And that's what is happening for sure. Like you're seeing shows like the WMBF Galaxy, they're trying to increase the prize pool in response. PNBA Olympia, they increase their prize pool. The prize money is getting better, but prize money is only one part of it. It's like you said, how many world champions do we know that the public has no idea who they are? Or even amateur athletes within their own federation have no idea who they are because the coverage of that athlete is so poor, right? So, like you said, after the show, there has to be something where that champion is, paraded around and seen at, festivals and put on big screens or, something so that the public knows who they need to be looking for.
Yeah, and I mean, that recognition is something that a lot of athletes have noted that have even natural athletes that have competed in the IFBB and made that jump, and like Kendall, I remember
Yeah.
mentioned that. I mean, it was just one of those things like the amount of recognition you get making that jump over to that league is just higher. Tested, untested, natty, not natty, even if you are still natty, like competing in that, you get some eyes on you recognition, and so there's just some prestige, like, you feel like you're being recognized rather than just some guy that won a natural bodybuilding world title, but nobody knows who he is, right? So,
Yeah, and some of this certainly is our biases, like individuals and athletes in North America. I think other regions do a better job of this. You
yeah,
can see it in the way that the promotions go and the number of athletes in some of the Asiatic countries, right? Like 200, 300 person shows. Like that's awesome to see because that means that there's that amount, in correlation or proportion, like that number of fans as well to support the sport over there. So, maybe we're just in a bad spot to be natural bodybuilders. And if we move to the UK or Asia or something, we'd be better off. But, as a global community, yeah, recognition, I think, goes a long way. The athletes want to feel like they're respected and they want to feel like they're going to have a legacy. And if they don't, they'll go somewhere where they do.
Yeah. And I do see this trending in positive directions, and we're trying to play our very small part in it by promoting athletes and getting these top athletes, a platform and to talk and to be seen on our page and discussed and such. But yeah, it does. I think you're right that it seems to be a little bit more of a problem in quote unquote problem in the U.S. than internationally, especially like in Europe and UK and areas like that, where it seems to be natural bodybuilding seems to be popping a little bit more.
Mhm. Yeah, I would absolutely agree. And a lot of that too is, trace it back to the personalities in the sport in that region, right? If there is an individual who has a big social media following, the sport's probably a little bit stronger there, just because we've talked about it, maybe even in the last podcast. You have to have some sort of draw from the general public, right? That's who feeds the sport. People, find the sport, they get into the sport, they start competing, they convince other people to compete. Maybe they become coaches and now they're coaching more people, right? So you have to have that public figure to draw eyes. And that's via YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, whatever. Like I'm not young enough to know how to do that. But I think of AJ in the UK, right? Like how many people has he influenced to get into natural bodybuilding because of his YouTube and his Instagram and his influence through other coaches, right? You have to find that person in that region and build that person up. So if you are a federation, find your AJ and just sponsor the shit out, right? Like that's the way to grow your federation and to grow the sport. You got to latch onto these big personalities, the same way that the IFBB did with CBUM, right? Like how massive is Classic Physique because of his popularity through social media? How many non-competitive bodybuilders know that name? That's what natural bodybuilding needs.
Yeah, I think yeah, leaning on those guys with that, have the followings, have the fans, have the people that are just interested in their journey, their story, what they're doing, that sort of thing is I think very impactful. I mean, I think about like are my own influences in natural bodybuilding and becoming interested in it. I think of, the Alberto Nunez's and the Matt Auguses and those guys and seeing those guys like, oh, they're doing this natural bodybuilding thing. That's cool, right? Like that's, I'm sure I'm, I mean, we've heard it from almost everyone in our space. It seems like has at least some influence in the natural building world with some of the quote unquote bigger names in our space, um, or even a lot
Yeah.
of guys
It's
take inspiration from untested guys like the Arnolds and the you know
mhm. Yeah, yeah. I mean, hey, I've said it, time and time again. When I was younger, I didn't know what steroids were. Like, I was so naive to all of it. And I went to a bodybuilding gym. That's where I first started training. I didn't even know if I wanted to bodybuild. Back then, I didn't really. I was training for soccer because I was going to be, a collegiate soccer player, and I was. But you look up and there's Arnold and Lee Labrada and those guys. And I'm like, damn, like, I want to be like that. And that's where the conversation ended. It wasn't like, oh, that guy's natty, that guy's not natty. It was just like, I want to be big, so I'm gonna lift. Cool. And like, I'd rather be naive and think that. But then eventually you find the root, right? So you mentioned like Ogus and Alberto. Is that who like you kind of initially latched onto within the sport?
those are, I think the first guys that I kind of saw and found out about natural bodybuilding. Yeah, I'd say Lane Norton was a big one too. Lane was probably actually earlier in those guys, but yeah, that's the kind of three that Chris Lovato too. Um, yeah,
Mhm.
seeing those guys, doing natural bodybuilding and oh, that's kind of cool, kind of neat that you can do this drug free. And yeah,
Mhm.
I guess those were yeah the guys that I
Yeah,
found and
I I
who
remember
did you
mine because I did it like reverse, right? So I was a personal trainer at the time. I didn't find the sport of natural bodybuilding until I was already into graduate school. I was done with soccer. I was just lifting. I was working as a personal trainer at the local Y, and one of the other trainers competed in men's physique. All I knew was he was going to do a bodybuilding show. I was like, this guy's not that big. Like, I'm bigger than him. I think I could do better. So I looked at his photos. I'm like, yeah, I could do that. I look where he competed, OCB. Like, all right, what's the OCB? So I start researching that. And then being, academically, inclined, I said, all right, how do I learn as much as I possibly can? So I actually started using our graduate school library to look up like hypertrophy and nutrition, like research articles. And through that found Lane Norton. So then I bought his prep book, read his prep book, and then and only then did I really start searching on Instagram to find like who are the competitors, who are the people. And it's funny, Alberto Nunez was the first, and it was that like this is 2017 at this point, right? 2016, 17. So it was that iconic photo of his where like his hands clasped most muscular, that like his chest is just doing all sorts of freaky stuff that's on the t-shirt they have now. That was the first photo I saw. I was like, that is insane. Like, I can do that? No way. Now I've come to find out I can't actually do that. I can try, but it won't be the same. So it was Berto. It was Jack Thorburn's side leg. If you remember his like 2016, 17 prep, where his like hamstring and quad separation was like actually like peeling apart. He was so lean. That one. And then I found AJ. So it was very funny that now like I have conversations with all three of those people just on like, a normal basis. But those were the people that drew me into the sport.
yeah, yeah. It's yeah, it's those are the people that make it cool and make it interesting. And I'm curious what, because you and I are about the same age, so I'm curious. Yeah, we're not gonna cut the episode off, but I comment below if you're maybe a few years behind us, say in your early 20s. Who are the guys in natural bodybuilding that you guys are finding these days? Is it still a lot of the Bertos and the AJs? I'm sure a lot of people will say that. But I'm curious who else is kind of the major influences because we had some of the same names, and I think a lot of people find the
Mhm.
same names in our era. But I'm curious what the era kind of right behind us, the Gen Zers, or I guess I think that would be because we're millennials. We're
Whatever,
old now.
whatever generation. Yeah. No, and you can almost like point out some people that could be that, right? Like I think the first one that popped into my mind was Julian Chen, right? Like he has a massive following. He has
Yeah,
a phenomenal physique. He's like active on social media, right? So like those are the guys that just are genuinely in the sport for the right reason. They may or may not be coaches. It's just they love doing this, and that's inspiring to people.
yeah, for sure. Yeah, but um, yeah. Is there anything else you
Yeah, I'd
think
be
can be
interested to see who. And don't lie and say Dan and I did because we know we're not inspiring anybody just yet. That's not our job. Um, maybe Leroy though.
Leroy is inspiring all of us.
He's
It's
the he's
insane.
the Canadian inspiration for sure.
Yeah, yeah. But is there anything else you kind of see as ways that either we or natural bodybuilding or the sport can move in a more positive direction such that people stick around? Is there anything else that kind of comes to mind?
There just has to be excitement, right? There
Yeah.
has to be excitement. And we've actually posted a couple people saying very similar things with different projects. If at the end of the day it's just a bodybuilding show, I don't think it's enough anymore, right? Like there needs to be a spectacle. The people expect more because of the, social media age and because of the, high level of production of everything now. Like we just got to step things up. Make it an event, make it an expo, right? Like that in itself is a perfect model, right? The Arnold just happened. It's an amazing show, but it wouldn't be the level that it is if it didn't have the vendors and the expo and the other sports that are going on, right? It's a celebration of fitness culture. And that's what natural bodybuilding is lacking right now. I know there are some shows that do have expos. I think of like ICN World Games had a version here in the US, like the Florida Pro have an expo hall, I believe, as well. Mr. America, obviously. So, those people are doing it right, and we just need more of that. and we need to continue to help those people and refine what they're already doing. And the big thing is helping the people that are already doing it, right? Instead of just trying to take away and bicker and fight and just, fight over crumbs pretty much at this point.
Yeah. Yeah, and when you say excitement, the other thing that comes to mind is just matchups and rivalries. Do you think we should lean into that a little bit more, and people should lean into that a little bit more?
Me personally, no. But do I think it's good for the sport? Yes, right? Like think about the Kai and Phil, right? Kai and Phil, shoot, what was it a couple years back? Nick Walker and the Boogeyman, right? Like it draws people in. People like controversy. So for
Yeah.
public perception, for views, for likes, for engagement, it's amazing. Personally, I think it's stupid because we're not in a combat sport, right? We're not in a skill-based sport. So like it's literally just I'm gonna go stand beside you and then the judges are gonna determine who's better. Like I have no say in that. So the whole,
But
concept
it's
of it
still
as a
competing
bodybuilder,
though. It's still
it
competing though.
is.
And who
But
can
like when
bring a
when I
better.
come back to my like team sport days, if someone's trash talking me on the other team, like, all right, I'm gonna just take you out. Like, come into my box as a goalie and you're gonna hit the deck, right? Like, and I can do something about it versus like I'm gonna flex harder on you. I'm gonna bump your elbow. Like, I don't know. It's different, but
It is a little
it's
different.
good
I
for
don't
this.
like poo-pooing on it though.
Yeah,
Because I mean, if there's a rivalry, I mean, a lot of times it's like, I want to take your title, man. Like,
yeah, yeah. I get that, right? Like, we're all competitors at heart, and I would never like discredit someone. But at the end of the day, it's just, I don't know. It's different. That's what I'll say. It's different. But again, I agree
I
that
mean,
I
yeah,
do think it
just
is a
because it's
positive
different, it's
thing
not a
for the
combat
sport.
sport. But still, that doesn't mean it, you can't lean into that, right? Like,
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah. And that goes like what we've done in the past too, right? Like you talked about like matchups and rivalries, right? Like it can't just be like talk. You got to see it. You got to, visualize it. And we've done those before, right? Like so and so versus so and so. They're both going to Mr. A. Like who's going to come out on top? Like that kind
Yeah,
of stuff. The federations need to embrace that kind of messaging and not just put up show flyers, right? Like the day of just slapping a show flyer on a gym wall or even posting it on your Instagram and calling it a day for promotion, like it's boring. People want more. They want to know like what's the show going to look like? What are you going to do for the athletes? Like who's going to be there? Like show some, some flashing lights and smoke. Like just have fun with it, right? It's got to be more.
yeah. And if any promoters out there want help hyping their show up and pumping their show up, reach out to us because
Mhm.
you know if we want to put together a matchup, we're down. So
We got the systems in
graphic,
place. Yeah. Yeah. And those are
we
fun to do, right? Like we enjoy
yeah,
doing
they're
them
a lot of fun.
because, and the athletes love them too, because no one else is doing that. Now, again, some have seen what we're doing and are starting to, and which is great. The more the merrier. But the athletes themselves, I think, actually get the most out of that because they love seeing those cool graphics and they save them for themselves. We've had people reach out like thanking us for like honoring them by putting them on one of our graphics. Like we're just three guys that love the sport, right? Like,
Yeah.
but yeah,
People like to see the hype and they like to see like, oh, people are actually interested in me and I'm being like it's giving that level of prestige almost like, oh, I'm actually like, an athlete. I am an athlete, right?
yeah.
So,
And I think it puts a little bit of positive pressure on the athletes too, right? Like they see it like, oh, now I got to really show up. Like I got to dig in. We've had people even say that where like as they get closer to the show, they're thinking about that and they're thinking about who's going to be there and the expectations that's been set. So yeah, I think it's a positive thing for sure.
so I think things in general are moving in positive directions, but yeah, I think this is was just something worth talking about because like I said, there's been a lot in the past few months that have just made that jump. And I'd like to see people stick around and make legacies within natural bodybuilding, and you know,
Hmm.
a
Yeah.
lot of great athletes out there. So
Yeah, we see a lot of one-time champions, kind of one and done, right? They do it, they've done it, and they just kind of walk away or go a different route. And I'd love to see the eventually, competing for titles, but also competing like who has the most titles, right? Like the back and forths, Jay and Ronnie, that kind of stuff.
yeah, I would love to see that. So yeah, well, we'll continue doing our small part, but if anyone listening is can help contribute to that effort, please please chime in. Please, please let us know what you think and chip in and let's make natural bodybuilding better. So, any closing thoughts before we tie this together?
No, no, I
Finish this up?
think, I'm excited for what the future is going to bring even this year, right? Like we talked about WMBF Galaxy. I think that's going to be a great show. Natty O seems to be ramping things up. WMBF Worlds is going to be back in California where they've had some, they know their venue out there. They can kind of dial in some of the things that people criticized this past year. Obviously, I'm biased towards the DFBA show that's upcoming, but I think there's a lot of good things happening. And it's just a matter of time before the trend starts to change. We just got to stay the course, continue to evolve as an industry, and not just get stuck in, well, this is the way we've always done it, because it's not going to work anymore. And if you do that, the crowd's going to leave you behind.
People vote with their feet. So, but.
Hmm. Yeah.
Cool,
All
man.
right.
Yeah, I figure we could get this, do this quick chat, but worthwhile discussion. Let us know what you think. What areas do you see that can be improved such that people are incentivized to stick around and stay the natty course? And yeah, let us know what you think, and we'll catch you in the next episode. Thanks for tuning in.
See you guys.